Hello, my name is Dr. Kevin Seal, and I'm a principal scientist at WSP. I work with Energy Alberta, where I am the technical lead for siting. I've been involved in infrastructure planning and analysis since the early 1990s, and I've worked on projects all over Canada and internationally. Most recently, I've worked on nuclear projects in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And it's my pleasure today to present to you on the site option evaluation work that we are doing with Energy Alberta on their Peace River nuclear project. Today, I'll give you an overview of first what makes a good nuclear site and why Energy Alberta is looking in the Peace River area. We'll talk about proposed locations. I'll walk you through our site selection process and how we are evaluating and comparing the sites. We'll give you an overview of the decision-making process. And if you do have any questions, there will be opportunities through this website to be able to provide feedback and comments to Energy Alberta. First, what makes a good nuclear site? A nuclear site is one that prioritizes safety, environmental stewardship, and long-term viability of the project. We do this by minimizing exposure to natural and human-caused hazards. So for example, we avoid areas that are prone to earthquakes or other unstable geotechnical processes. We also try to avoid or minimize proximity to other facilities or infrastructure which could potentially, through accidents, influence or impact the facility. For example, we avoid large airports and large facilities which may produce chemicals, for example. We look at areas which safeguard the environment, so we avoid sensitive habitat. We avoid areas that may have critical or key species, as well as minimizing negative impacts to the community and the cultural values. So we take into account where people are living, what they're doing in terms of their daily lives, and what they may have done in the past. And perhaps most importantly, the site needs to meet the technical needs of the site. So there is supporting infrastructure such as cooling water, which needs to be taken into account, as well as access to transportation and transmission. And the site itself needs to be located on suitable ground. So why is Energy Alberta looking at the Peace River area? Well, studies conducted from 2005 until 2010 indicated that this area was suitable potentially for up to 4,800 megawatts of nuclear power generation. And the reason for this is the large watercourse, the Peace River, which traverses through this area, and it is an excellent source for cooling water. There's also favorable ground conditions, and the area has excellent access to transportation and transmission infrastructure. In addition, there is a local workforce, and the community has significant opportunities for growth and development. And lastly, this area of Alberta is seeing a very high growth in power demand and is underserved by current generation sources. There are currently two site options under evaluation for the proposed nuclear facility, and both of these are approximately 30 kilometers north of the town of Peace River. What we are calling option 1 is east of Highway 743 and south of Township Road 864. This site is within the county of Northern Lights. Option 2 is north of Highway 986 and Township Road 854, next to Range Road 203. This site is within Northern Sunrise County. And how have we arrived at the selection of these two options? Well, the decision is a complex one, but we break it down into smaller pieces by evaluating layers of spatial information. And luckily in Alberta and in Canada in general, we have access to a tremendous amount of spatial information through the provincial governments, through commercial parties, and through the federal government as well. But the information in and of itself has no meaning for the siting of a nuclear facility. So we have to impart that meaning on the information. We do that by first selecting the information and sorting it into different categories. So the first category is environmental. This is where we put information such as critical species, critical habitat, wetlands, natural vegetation versus human-influenced vegetation, and so forth. The next bucket is the social or cultural. This describes the human landscape, so where humans are, where people are living, where our communities are, where we have businesses, where we have cultural and historical resources that we, of course, need to be aware of and minimize the impact to. The last category of information is the technical or safety. This captures the information required to support the facility. So we have geology, we have seismic activity, we have terrain, we have steep slopes, we have water courses, and so forth. We can also describe the data in terms of whether or not we need to avoid it. So these are exclusionary indicators. So under no circumstances can we site the reactor in proximity or on top of these indicators. So for example, where ground is too steep, where there may be an airport or a large community, we would want to avoid that direct proximity. Other information we can classify are constraints. So these are areas that we may want to avoid or minimize our proximity to some degree. And conversely, we may have opportunities where we actually may want to co-locate or be near to certain types of indicators. All of the spatial information collected is presented in a tool we call the Indicator Workbook. The siting of a nuclear reactor is very complex, but we simplify it by breaking it down into a series of smaller decisions for each individual layer of information that went into the process. As I mentioned, the first category of information is the environmental theme. This includes examples such as important bird areas, key wildlife and biodiversity zones, protected and managed lands, and sensitive species habitat. The social and cultural category contains indicators which are important for the human landscape. It includes historical resources, population density, proximity to workforce, and recreational areas as a few examples. And lastly, we have the technical theme, which includes infrastructure and other considerations which are important for the siting of the facility, including where are aerodromes or airports, where are aquifers, hazardous facilities, highways, oil and gas infrastructure, transmission and transportation infrastructure. This is an example of a page of the indicator workbook. First, it includes the indicator name and what the indicator is intended for siting purposes. In this case, it's wetlands, and we are trying to minimize the encroachment on wetlands. Next, we provide the source of the information, so where the data came from. In this case, this is a provincial data layer from Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, ABMI. We describe how the information was processed from its raw form, so any analysis that we have done on the information, we provide a description of that. And on the lower left-hand side of the page, we provide a more detailed description of what the data actually means for the siting of the facility. In the center of the page, you'll see a graphic portrayal of the information. In this case, this is our regional study area centered on Peace River, the town of Peace River. You'll see the two siting options, option 1 in green, option 2 in blue. And what this depicts are the locations of sensitive wetlands. And we depict this through the lens of suitability, where high suitability is portrayed as green and low suitability is portrayed as red and neutral suitability is portrayed as yellow. Exclusion indicators use the color blue to show the area that was avoided for siting. On the right-hand side of the page, we have the relative importance of the indicators. And by relative, I mean the importance of this indicator relative to others within the environmental theme. So in this case, wetlands are scored fairly highly at 80% relative to the other indicators, which you can see as the light green bars. Where you see a gray bar, that's actually an exclusion indicator, and so its importance is absolute. It cannot be used for siting of a facility. On this slide, we have additional information that we can build into the indicators. So these are buffers and setbacks. So for example, we may have an area that is excluded for siting, perhaps a very sensitive wetland. And the concept is the closer we are to that exclusion variable, the more unsuitable the land is. And we can apply a distance decay that the further we move from that indicator, the more suitable the land becomes for the siting of the facility. Conversely, we may have infrastructure such as a highway, which we cannot build on, but we may want to be closer to it. So we can have a distance decay buffer that the further we are away from that highway or transportation infrastructure, the lower the suitability of the land. Some other examples. So this is an exclusion indicator, important bird areas. This is Alberta provincial data layer, and you can see that these are far to the south and west of our two site options. And the exclusion is portrayed as this large gray bar on the right-hand side that you see. Another example, native vegetation areas. So we've mapped where predominantly native or natural vegetation occurs in the Peace River. Those areas are have lower suitability than areas which may have been disturbed or altered by human activity. So natural vegetation areas are portrayed as low suitability or red, and highly suitable areas are more agricultural or human modified vegetation. Grizzly bear habitat to the west of the study area is not impacted by our two site options. Here we have a social indicator, future urban development. We have very low suitability around densely populated settlements, and out to 5 kilometers beyond that, we have highly suitable areas. So here's where we do not want to interfere with the future growth and development of communities with the facility. We've modeled the proximity to the workforce, so we've looked at the drive time and drive distance for people to access the two site options. You'll notice there's a highly unsuitable area between the confluence of the two rivers in the area. Hazardous facilities. This is hazardous means hazardous for the operation of the facility. These facilities which are on the landscape are oil and gas, and they are very safe, and they've been operating for many years without any incident, but we need to take them into account for the siting of the reactor, and we've done that by making these areas exclusionary, and we've added a 1 or 2 kilometer buffer depending on what the facility is. Example of superficial geology. This is a fairly complex indicator. Our subject matter experts have looked at the mapping information, and the various geological features have been categorized in terms of suitability from high to low. All of the information that we've collected and represented by the indicator workbook is distilled down through a computer software program to create a single view of suitability on the landscape. And we represent this information by using a heat map, similar colors to what we used before for each indicator, where green areas indicate highly suitable areas for a nuclear facility and red indicate areas that are non-suitable. White areas in this map are exclusionary, where we cannot site the facility. And this is a very powerful tool for us because we can analyze it to detect the most suitable locations of a certain size for a given facility. And because we've collected the spatial information that went into the suitability analysis, we can also compare and evaluate the differences between the different site options. Here is an example of our suitability map for our technical scenario. We actually did 2 scenarios for our analysis. The first is our technical, where we used only the technical indicators to depict where suitable sites are from a technical perspective. And this was done because under no circumstances would we select a site which was highly suitable only from an environmental or social perspective, but did not meet the feasibility or the suitability requirements of the technical aspect. So here you see areas again where red is highly non-suitable, green is highly suitable, white is exclusion. The reason why there's quite a bit of red to the east or the right-hand side of the page is there's a lot of oil and gas infrastructure, which we want to avoid being in proximity to. In the center of the regional study area, you'll see the city of Peace River, and there is quite a bit of green to the north of that area where we have selected our 2 site options. Site option 1 as the green polygon and site option 2 as the blue polygon. The second scenario that we did was what we call our proportional. And here we brought the technical and the environmental information in combined with the technical suitability. This gave us a little more green, a little more suitable areas for us to look for potential sites. And again, you see that area of oil and gas infrastructure development to the east. And you see the 2 site options located on highly suitable ground in proximity to the cooling water source of the Peace River. Here we have a more zoomed in view focused just on the site option 1 and site option 2. On the left-hand side is the technical scenario. So again, these are the technical variables or technical indicators only depicted. And you see the 2 areas of still having very highly suitable ground. There's quite a bit of exclusionary ground on site option 2 on the east side of the river due to terrain, but there's still adequate spacing available there for the siting of the facility. On the right, we have the proportional scenario where we've included the technical and the social along with the technical indicators. And again, you see both locations being very highly suitable. The decision-making process that Energy Alberta will undertake will consider the information that I presented here in our siting evaluation, but that will not answer all of the questions. So there are a number of other technical studies which are ongoing in parallel to the siting analysis. These would include, for example, geotechnical studies where drilling information will be used to understand the subsurface geology in the various areas being evaluated. There are water intake engineering studies being conducted. There are terrain and geohazard studies, and this is just to name a few. And there needs to be a confirmation of the land options to ensure that the site is suitable to establish. So the final decision will be informed by multiple inputs over a period of time, and it is expected to be iterative because, again, we can't know everything that we would like to know, and as we ask more questions, we get more answers, and that goes back into the process of selecting a suitable site. So we'd like to hear from you. Do you have any questions about our site selection process or any of the indicators and information that went into that process? Are there other physical features or land uses on either site option that you are aware of that we could include in our decision-making process? Or any other information that you would like to see represented? Again, options will be made available at the end of this video for you to provide feedback to Energy Alberta.